Right. Well, I'll start by introducing myself. More and more people are going to file in, but being cognizant of everyone's time here, I do want to make sure that I'm delivering what I said I would for you all and give some of your time back. But my name's Eric Beadle. I am a consultant slash coach with Charge. We're an agency that's focused on sponsorship development, sponsorship coaching, and one of the things that we like to do is a deck diagnosis. And the importance of the deck diagnosis is in sponsorship selling, one of the most important pieces is going to be your sponsorship deck. So as a seller, this is a way for you to not only tell your story about who you are, what your property is, what your event is, but it's also a way for you to show how you can connect your audience to potential sponsor. Ultimately, your goal is to be a solution, and you need to prove that you're a solution, and your deck needs to reflect that information. So today I am using a deck from Trey Burke, and let me go ahead and share that. Trey Burke is a young racer, and they have given us the opportunity to kind of go through their deck and provide feedback. So everybody's deck, first and foremost, is going to be, a little bit different, but the bones of it, as far as some of the information that needs to be in there, should always have somewhat of a pattern. It should have certain inclusions to where, again, you're putting your best foot forward because you're competing against a lot of other properties and individuals trying to get that same sponsor. So with any deck, there's a lot of good to every one of them. There's a lot of preferences that, I may ask for a tweak, but it doesn't affect the integrity of the deck. But there are some restructuring, there are some suggestions on how it should be laid out that will ultimately be beneficial. So for the sake of Trey, there's a lot of great things that he does in his deck. He uses great imagery. And what is the best thing about the imagery is it's powerful, it's exciting. So being a sponsor who may not have any affiliation within the motorsports world, this is a great way to show how entertaining this sport is and help generate that excitement. So throughout this deck, you're going to see great imagery from Trey and his team about some of the things that they do. So starting off from the beginning, like I said, here's his title slide. It's a great slide. It's really exciting. It draws me in. So keep that in mind when you are doing your initial deck. There are a couple things that you'll see throughout that I'll point out, such as kind of the font here. This can sound nitpicky, but one of the things that I want to be cognizant of is putting myself in the sponsor's shoes. If I'm reading this deck, I don't want to be distracted by certain elements. And throughout, you'll see, some of this, you'll look at it and it'll kind of catch your eye and you'll do a double take about the wording. So again, it might sound nitpicky, but the point is to eliminate these distractions from somebody that's reading this deck. So the next slide that I would include before we get to this, which is brand principles, is I would first introduce this deck by adding a why slide. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a sponsor, why am I getting this deck? What is the point of it? Why is Trey reaching out to me? And Trey and his team need to convey that this is an exciting opportunity for Trey Burke Racing and an opportunity for him to connect your fans, your audience through his platform. So I would first address any sponsorship deck with that initial why page. Now, here, again, the brand principles, I think it's a great slide, great imagery, but one of the things I want to point out is right now it's somewhat of an empty slide. And what I mean by that is, hey, it's great to talk about, he's young, exciting, and he's fresh, but there's no meat to it. It's just more of a filler slide. So what I would suggest instead of this is I would include an About Us section or an About Trey section. So really how the format should start is you have your title slide, you have your why slide, and then I would suggest your About Us slide. So if it's your property or your event, and in this case, it's about Trey, that's how I would introduce it. And so in my suggestion, I would eliminate this page. So what they do is they do a great job of now introducing who Trey is. So it does follow that flow in the right order once we kind of eliminate that brand principle slide. But a couple things I would do here is instead of maybe here's what the goal is, I would again kind of list maybe his accomplishments. Being a young racer, not at the NASCAR level yet, not at the IndyCar level yet. There's still, who is Trey? What has he done to warrant, my investment? And Trey, as you'll see as we go through here, he's done quite a bit. He's been fantastic in his endeavors. But I might list some of those accomplishments to, again, excite them about who they're standing on, who they're putting their name by. So one of the key factors in any sponsorship is, as a property, you want to be associated with the right brand. And as a sponsor, you want to be associated with the right property. So, you're going to see the excitement of Trey, the accomplishments he's made. So a sponsor is going to have an opportunity to stand with somebody that excels really well in this sport and has a significant platform. Now, there is a couple other items that I would include in this About Us section, but they are the way that this is laid out now, they have that information in later pages. So when I come to those pages, I'm going to point those out because I do think there's some really neat elements that they talk about later that can kind of be a part of this About Us section. So after we get through, kind of the initial structuring of the why slide, the About Us section, then you start getting into, connecting those dots. And those dots are my fans is your customers. My platform can reach or solve the solution that you're trying to solve as a business. And what he does here, I like the intro slide, why motorsports marketing. Why motorsports is a solution. Now, right now, I might change it a little bit to maybe why Trey Burke is a solution. But right now, he is in motorsports. And I think this is kind of a powerful slide. And it kind of tees off the question in your head as somebody reading it is, well, yeah, tell me why I should be in motorsports. So as we get into this section, there are going to be a few things I want to talk about from a restructuring standpoint. I like this slide. I would maybe reduce it a little bit. But what this does is he kind of piques the audience's interest as far as why motorsports. And then Trey addresses your company has goals. So again, we go back to the idea that as a property, as an individual, as an event, you're solving a solution. And what Trey is trying to convey here is, look, we know your company has goals, and these are the things that we can achieve for you. So I do like how he kind of addresses this as far as, let me be that solution. Now, the one thing I do want to point out is earlier when I kicked off this diagnosis was the font. So as you can see, it's unique. It is a neat looking font, but as you can see, it can be a little bit distracting with some of the text. And again, I want that to be avoided throughout so that you have the full attention of the sponsor as they're reading through this deck. So after this page, I would then suggest going into demographic information and psychographic information. And what Trey and his team does at this point in time is they start talking about the benefits of motorsports versus other sports. That's great information to have, but I think it's just a bit too soon. Because again, I want the focus to be on how I can prove to you that I'm reaching your audience. So again, I know that sounds like a broken record, but ultimately that's what the objective is. So what I mean by demographics, I want information in there if I'm a sponsor to know what's the gender breakdown? Who are the majority of your fans? Because this can be related to, if you're a high population of male viewers or male fans, you have a couple options here. You might be able to reach out to a brand that's looking to create more awareness within the male community. Or you might have a brand that's like, hey, we're male dominated. We want to continue to focus where the male attention is. So there's kind of two ways to look at that. The other side of it is I want to know, income, racial breakdown, all these different elements kind of help identify who your target audience is and how it relates to that sponsor. So this whole deck is really about relations and showing that connection. So I would highly recommend starting out with a demographic slide. After that demographic slide, I would then suggest kind of a psychographic slide. And what I mean by that is try to uncover or identify information that shows your fans' interest outside of motorsports. What are things that they like to do? Where are they spending their money? What are their hobbies? And again, why this is important is if you know you have a high level of interest in one particular area, you can sell this to a potential sponsor who fits that industry. So having that demographic and that psychographic information is initially going to generate a little bit of excitement about, wow, they really do hit home with who we're trying to hit. So from there, I would roll into something like this: motorsports versus other sports. The title can be different, however you'd want to name it. But the benefit of this slide and what the Trey Burke team is trying to prove is motorsports has a really high level of reach. And that, again, is big because motorsports fans tend to be very, very loyal, brand loyal. So if you can show, again, that, hey, we match with your demographic, our fans have similar interest to what your product or services are, but better yet, our fans also have a high level of brand loyalty, then that is a win-win situation for both parties. But again, I would include this information after you provide the demographic and the psychographic information. So similar to what I just talked about, Trey and his team talked about the loyalty of the fans. Now, a couple things I want to point out on this particular slide is if you're going to put information in under a certain title or a certain segment breakdown, make sure that information is relevant or is highlighted correctly. So for example, this talks about our fans are loyal. So as you'll see through the slide, there's no information that's really talking about the loyalty of the fans. This is, again, kind of talking about a little bit about demographics, a little bit about the excitement of the track. So this particular slide, the title is great, it's enticing, but it needs to talk about the loyalty of the fans. So my suggestion to the Burke team would be, let's find information about the fans. What makes them loyal? What makes them more loyal than maybe fans within football or baseball or whatever it is? But the title needs to reflect what that information is. But in principle, I like the direction of what that is supposed to mean. It's just missing a little bit of what the actual information being presented is. And then the last piece to this particular section, which is, I call it really the meat, is the social media reach. I mean, that's always big. I know social media can have a negative connotation, but in this particular scenario, in confirming with the Burke team, all this information is relevant from Trey's social platforms. And again, this just helps show the reach that he has. And what I like about this is, he gives a breakdown of the, age, the gender. He even shows the geographic distribution of where his platforms are being reached most frequently. So I really like this slide because it does tell a story. He has over 22,000 followers. That's a nice number. It's a lot bigger than mine. I don't have a lot of people interested in what I do. So this is a great slide, another story to tell. So I think the Burke team does a great job here. So before I jump into where they are now, I kind of want to recap how we should see this structured. They had a great title slide. And again, my recommendation would then be to lead in with a why slide. What is the purpose of this deck? Why am I receiving it as a sponsor? I would then structure it or follow it with the about section. So some information about Trey, some of his accomplishments, generate that excitement of why a brand should want to stand on stage with Trey. And then you start going into, again, that meat of it is connecting those dots. So talking about the demographic, the audience information, and then talking about the sport as a whole. So that, again, to me is some of the meat, some of the eye-grabbing stuff. As a sponsor, it lets me know that this makes sense from a relationship standpoint. The next piece of it should be a little bit more about your sponsorship benefits. And what I do like what they did here is they talk about activation. Activation benefits, things like that, they're not the same. Activation as a way to take a sponsorship benefit and put it into action. So in this scenario, I want to talk about some of the things that Trey does. He and his team, they do a great job of showing the different opportunities from a logo placement standpoint by showing the different cars he races. So where your brand's logo could be. And then as you scroll down just another page further, it talks about the other options that are available. Hospitality options, merchandise options, VIP suite options. So to me, this initial title should be addressed a little bit differently. And instead of it being activation, I would maybe put sponsorship opportunities. And what I would then suggest is, instead of listing out, hey, activation, we have hospitality and merchandise, instead I would create what we call a menu of opportunities. And what that means is this is an opportunity for Trey Burke Racing or for anybody to list the available options or available assets that you have as a property or as an individual to sell. So in this particular area, we can talk about merchandise. Trey has the availability for sponsors to have sponsored t-shirts. He goes further about even more signage about placement on his uniform, media engagement, social media engagements. So all those things are really kind of the opportunities and assets that he has. So instead of it calling activation, I would really condense these 3 pages into one page that just lists, here's the availability or the available options you have to get involved with Trey Burke Racing. And what you have as the seller or the property or the individual gives you the opportunity to learn from the sponsor, to really figure out what their needs and wants are, and to create a customizable package based on those needs and wants. So you're showing what's available. You're going to listen and learn from that sponsor what they need and want. And then you can generate a package based on what those needs and wants are. So after we kind of go through those benefits, what's listed, what's available, and I want to scroll down a little bit further because he has, excuse me here, go back up here. I would then go into activation ideas. So, he had that slide that said activation. Like I mentioned, I would change that to sponsorship opportunities and list those opportunities, but then help give ideas to that sponsor about how you can activate. So, provide a few examples. You saw on one of the slides earlier that he has the ability for VIP hospitality. So maybe that is a suite that's hosted by, a particular brand that can host a, networking event. Whatever it may be, give ideas of what you are capable of producing for them to, again, further generate excitement, but further just kind of kick off some ideas for them, like, okay, this really is a fit for me. This is a unique solution for me as a brand to accomplish the needs that I want. Now, the one thing that I always caution about is, before you start listing your benefits and your assets and the different activation ideas that you have, consider what your bandwidth is. We don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Let's make sure there's a plan in place to where you can truly activate and integrate these benefits in action. So again, avoid overpromising and underdelivering. And all that means is really evaluating what your assets are, evaluating your bandwidth, and your ability to actually execute. So that just a word of advice on that front. So another piece that he adds, and I do like this because motorsport's a little bit different than maybe your traditional sports, but this 2024 schedule, and I know it says 2024, the Burke team is actively creating a 2025 deck. But what this does and what the 2025 deck will do is show where he's going, the reach that he has, the different locations. So it's exciting again. This is not just a young racer that's going to race in the backyard in his neighborhood. It is, fully, he's traveling to different locations and he's getting in front of folks. So I like having this schedule in there because I think it, again, just shows, this is not a small opportunity. It's a really unique, big opportunity that the Burke team has available for you as a sponsor. The other thing that they added, which in principle I have no real issue with, they put in a slide about their goal. So their goal for 2024 was to be in 50 races. It's not necessary, in my opinion, because again, it's somewhat empty. It's a goal. It's great to show, hey, this is what we'd like to do. They already showed what their guaranteed schedule was because that's what you can deliver on. If you're going to have something in here like this, I would maybe restructure it. Instead of 2024 goal, it would be, other opportunities that may be available or other exposure opportunities, whatever it may be. But it's not a necessary slide. Now, for the sake of this deck, this is a slide that they traditionally do not include. This is more for nonprofit integration. So I'm going to just breeze past this particular page. So if you recall, I mentioned earlier in the About Us section how, Trey has an opportunity to introduce himself, who he is, what he does, makes it really exciting. But also, maybe list some of your accomplishments. And Trey's had a lot of them. He's been very, very, very successful in his young career and poised to continue that success. So I would maybe put some of these accomplishments on that About Us section. And what that does is, it condenses that into a really strong story. And then two, it really kind of this structure turns out to be a little funky in the sense that you talk about Trey, you go through the deck, and then we start talking about Trey again. So I would add that, move it logically into that right order of this is about him, this is what he does. So I would restructure this, eliminate this page, and pull some of these accomplishments into that section. Now, this is a really unique page as well, and I really like it. It is their story of how their brand came to be, what their logo means. So I love that this is in here, but again, I would suggest maybe to move that up under the About Us section, because I think, again, logically, it flows well. You talk about Trey, you talk about his accomplishments, and you know what? This is his story. This is his logo. This is what it means. And for a younger racer, some of that connectivity in the story behind him is going to resonate. So I really like this inclusion. They did a great job of this story. And I think it's a fantastic page to have included in this deck. Values and characteristics. My suggestion to them was I would eliminate this page. There's no doubt that he's a great person, great individual, but this is more of, again, a filler slide. Every individual wants to position themselves of high value, high character. But again, as a sponsor, first and foremost, I've learned about Trey through the About section. I've learned about his story. Now I'm interested in how you're connected to an audience. There's really nothing that points to, the outside of racing endeavors that would point to this particular slide. Again, my suggestion would be to eliminate it. It's not hurting the integrity of the slide or the deck, excuse me. But it's not necessary to include. And then we finish with his kind of his contact page. So I'd maybe make this a little bit bigger. Again, I know that's a little bit nitpicky, but that's just a preference point on my end. So in recap, I want to rediscuss kind of the structure. Title page. I want to go to the why section. I want you to really emphasize the About Us section, or the About You or your property, and then get into the meat of your deck about why you're a solution. And again, the whole point of these sponsorship decks are to be a solution or prove that you're a solution for a marketing pain that a sponsor has. I want to thank you all for your time. And if there are any questions, there is a Q&A section at the bottom. So if you want to type any questions in, I'll be happy to answer them. A couple other things I want to point out is after this call, I will just send a follow-up email to each one of you. First and foremost, thanking you for the time. But I do also want to include, if you want more information, my calendar link, so you can set up some time to talk. And then the last thing I want to mention is here in the next couple of weeks, we will be introducing a mini course about deck creation. So it'll go a little bit more in depth about the do's and don'ts and the best ways to position your deck. So we'll have more information on that I will provide once it's ready. The mini course will be under $100. And again, it's going to be a fantastic tool for those who are looking to put their deck in a more effective situation. So with that, I'll hang on for a couple minutes if there are any questions that you want to plug in. And then, like I said, I will follow up with an email. So again, thank you everyone for your time, and I will hang out here for a minute or two. And I'm just going through here. Martha, I see your question here. Yeah, so in essence, Martha, a deck is, the bones should always have somewhat of a similar structure, but a nonprofit deck is going to touch on some different things. You're going to touch a little bit more on what the benefits are being associated with your nonprofit and what your nonprofit is benefiting and the purpose behind it. What I can do, Martha, I think it's probably a deeper conversation. I can send you an email and we can talk about that a little bit more for you if you'd like. So I can send you an email like I am with everybody, and we can talk about this in a little bit more detail if you'd like. And Megan, it looks like you had a very similar question with Martha. Again, we'll set some time aside, but one of the things would be from a nonprofit standpoint is, what is your impact? What is that association? How, as a sponsor, being included with the nonprofit, how am I making that impact? Because that's ultimately what you're doing in a lot of these cases is you are making a significant impact. And, I would focus on more of that story. But like I said, we can absolutely talk more. We've had the pleasure of working with a few nonprofits, and they're very unique but very fun to work with. And Josh, I see your other question here. Any tips for connecting your demos to the prospects? Yeah, so the way I'm reading this is, do you try to customize this to maybe a potential sponsor that you're working with? And I would absolutely say, if you are sending this to, a financial institution or real estate or whatever industry that you're going after from a sponsorship standpoint, I would absolutely look to connect demographic information that is related to that industry. And a lot of times that, you have to do some digging, but that information is usually pretty readily accessible to be found. But I would address it that way. I hope I answered your question the right way. That's how I'm reading it. If not, let me know. And then we have a great question about, should we list our sponsorship levels or the monetary values? We always teach to list kind of your menu of opportunities. And what we mean by that is, again, showing the availability. Now, we know a lot of times a sponsor is still going to ask you what the cost is of that sponsorship. So instead of saying, hey, we have a gold, silver, bronze package from $10,000, $8,000, or $6,000, what you can do is you can provide a range. We have sponsorship packages available anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000 based on what your needs are. So if a sponsor comes back and says, hey, I would really like to have, an on-site interaction sampling section. Well, let's determine what that value is, determine all those different benefits, and then you can come up with a price within what their needs and wants are. So the biggest thing is, in my opinion, is I never want you to undersell your sponsorship, and I never want you to oversell. I want you, well, if you can oversell, great. But I don't want to have you position yourself out of someone's budget before you have a conversation. So that's why we really specifically try to say, give them that range. And then you're being upfront about, here's what is available. Here's what the investment could be. And now these individuals, they know what their budget is, and they can start having that more effective dialogue. Well, great. Hey, again, I want to say thank you for everyone's time again. One, I appreciate the questions. I love when people ask questions. So again, thank you for the interaction. Expect an email from me. Have my calendar in there, and we will get this recording uploaded, and I'll let you know how you can find that. And I look forward to chatting with you all. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll be in touch.